I want you to look at this map. This is a concealed carry map that I have on my phone. And I want you to take a look at all of the states that are green versus all the states that are red. Right? I am a resident, I should say a permanent resident of New Jersey, but I have a Florida non-resident permit to carry, and I also have a Utah non-resident permit to carry. And as of right now, I can carry in 33 states in the United States. I can carry a concealed firearm in 33 states in the United States. Now look at that map. Does anybody notice how polarized that map is? Let's not, ignore the pink elephant in the room. Pretty much all the states that are green and recognize each other permits are states that would largely be considered Republican-controlled states. In all the states that are red, with the exception of South Carolina, and actually I think Colorado, they pissed a lot of people off in Colorado, which is why they lost their elections. But Colorado is another state that's in the middle. But other than that, looking at the map, it's mainly California and New Jersey and New York. Now, if I change the color on here a little bit, and I was a permanent resident of the state of Florida, there'd be a whole bunch more states on here that would be green. Actually, I can go into the app. Yeah, if I was a resident of the state of Florida, pretty much all the states, with the exception of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., and California and Hawaii are may issue states, or excuse me, all the other states are shall issue states, and the ones I just listed are may issue states. Now, a lot of people try to, they ask me, they're like, well, I don't see what, all of this has to do with, race or race politics. Well, a large number of African Americans moved to California. And California also has a large minority population in terms of Hispanics, Latinos, Mexicans, whatever you want to call them. Same with the Northeast, right around New Jersey and New York. And you could throw Philadelphia in there because the rest of Philadelphia is like the rest of rural America. Philadelphia is like, a major urban center. It's a city of the first class. And in these Democratic strongholds, they have the most strict gun laws. Now, I went and I did a little research about, what happened, to the African American community specifically. And there's an exceptional documentary called Bastards of the Party, which has ex-gang member, I believe his name is Bones, who does a fantastic job of describing, what went on, how the gangs were really, they really started out at protecting, black people from, a lot of the, the white racists that were rolling around at the time. And then there was white flight. And after white flight, after the white people left, after the race riots of 67 and 68, after the, death of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, which I think John F. Kennedy was the first. So was that in 63 or 65? I forget. Okay. But at those times, you basically had white people leave cities like Camden. Like if I showed you pictures of Camden, New Jersey back in 1955, and then showed you pictures of Camden, New Jersey today, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it was crazy when I was in high school, and I went to a predominantly white high school, and I would talk to the people's parents and stuff like that, and they say, "Yeah, I grew up in Camden." I'm like, "What? You grew up in Camden? How is that possible?" Because I'm not comprehending the timeline. Like when he grew up in Camden, it was like 50s or 1960s, and then it just the white flight and white people left, and they took the jobs with them. And that's one of my biggest points of contention with a lot of the conservative and Republican arguments that always want to try to act like it's morality, or it's people's behaviors, or they're just innately like this and like that. I don't care what anybody says. If you don't have the resources to be personally responsible, it's extremely difficult for you to be personally responsible. You're not going to have people who don't have resources acting the same as people who do have resources. And this has been a problem for African Americans, basically since this nation's conception. That they're thrust into a society that requires, them to have, the same access to tools and resources as the dominant culture. But people want to play dumb like they don't know that's what's going on. But when you look at the map, and like I was saying, going into my research, I was put on to the Contras, the Nicaragua Contras, and how Reagan and the CIA, with their selling arms to Iran, to try to fund the groups that they were supporting in Nicaragua, how they allowed them, to basically, have their drug trade. The drug trade took off in the 80s, and that was at the same time where you had large-scale deindustrialization in America. Everything was being made overseas. Everything started to say made in China and made in Japan. And you had a disposable population that was no longer needed as a labor force, which is mainly African American males. And we all know if a man can't make enough money to support a family, a lot of times what you'll see is they won't stick around. Then you combine that with the incorporation of drugs and narcotics in the African American community that are coming from the Reagan administration and the CIA being dumped in the African American community. And then what does that create? Now, not only do you have the drug dealers who are making money, they never had money, but now they're making money. You possibly have, 1, 2, or 3 millionaires, within a given neighborhood now, off of all the money that they were making. Now they got to defend their turf. They got all this money, and they're capable of going out there and doing what? Buying, more guns. And so pre-1994 assault weapons ban, right? People could just go out. You could buy, AKs, you could buy AR-15s, you could buy a whole bunch of handguns, and the violence was getting worse and worse. And I might add the clip at the end of this not this documentary, I might add a clip at the end of my video, of where, they basically, Bones basically spells it out. He was like, they didn't care when we were in our own communities killing each other. But, we wanted to get away from the ghetto and the poverty and all that other stuff. And we wanted to enjoy, and he says it very specifically, that they wanted to go out and in the mainstream America, where all the mainstream Americans were, go to the movies, go to the beach. They wanted to enjoy all of that. But then they would go there and then he'd bump into his enemy, and the next thing you know, they're shooting back at each other with the whole bunch of white people around. Now white people are getting hit by stray bullets. And then that's when the police came down and said, hey, we have a problem. And at the same time, the police were coming down and with the, the hammer of Thor on the narcotics game and the war on drugs. They were also having a war on gangs. And I mean, just look at the timeline, right? We all know drugs took off in the 80s, the whole crack cocaine era, New Jack City, all that took off, in the mid to late 90s, right? Especially in places like Miami, Harlem, New York, and, Los Angeles. And with the explosion of drugs, the explosion of drug dealers and gangs and people fighting over turf, the violence skyrocketed. And anti-gunners came through, and they saw, and if you really legitimately look at it, be it at the time of what was going on, you would say, well, they were right. It made sense, to why are all these guns so free and easily able to be bought? When you're fueling it with the drugs, you're fueling it with the drug game that supports the gangs, and then the rivalries that are naturally going to happen over people fighting over, basically the only economy that exists in these urban communities. Because again, America is deindustrialized. There's no manufacturing jobs like that anymore. There's nothing a man could graduate high school and support his family. And then here you got, the cartels or whoever, dropping off kilos via, the Los Angeles, the police department, or the, customs or whoever, CIA, dropping it off right in my downtown Miami, dropping it off right in, or running it up 95 all the way up to New York, or dropping it off in Los Angeles. I mean, if you have Miami and Los Angeles, if you have Miami, you have New York. If you have Los Angeles, you basically have like everything that's out in the Midwest. And if you're running a border town, by Texas, then you got, right up the Mississippi, you have, all you need is those key cities, and you have the whole United States in terms of drug trafficking. But this fueled the violence, and they came down and they said, we want gun control, and Feinstein came through. Look at the timeline. People say, oh, this is not true, and because a lot of white people, they don't want to accept that, there were white people in positions of power who either, did this intentionally, turned a blind eye, combination of both, whatever it may have been, and has created, even problems that, exist today, with typically three generations, of people who are now byproducts of, their daddy getting locked up, or their granddaddy getting locked up, or growing up in a single parent home because either somebody got locked up or somebody got killed because they were involved in all of that. African Americans were not manufacturing the drugs. African Americans were not, bringing it into the country, wholesale. I like what one of the white guys says in the documentary. He says, he's like, there's not enough of a market, in the ghetto, to support, all the drugs, that were being sold. This is, my brother recently, he just had a friend, who died of a heroin overdose, white guy. So it's, even though it's painted as a black problem, it's not a black problem. It's just that's where the drugs get dumped off in the community. That community implodes, but it's being supported by, white people who are coming out and buying the drugs. You can see this in the Badlands in Philadelphia. That's like the biggest open outdoor heroin market that there is on the East Coast. Badlands, Kensington, Philadelphia. Google it. Look it up. Search it. They had not too long ago, they were looking for a woman because somebody videotaped her with their cell phone. She had a little girl with her, and the little girl was basically like shaking her and trying to wake her mom up, and her mom was high as a kite, all doped up on the bus. And this is normal out there. This is normal out there. But black people didn't create this problem. You take a group of impoverished, disadvantaged, disenfranchised people, and you dump drugs on top of them, and they're more than willing to work that market. They're not being utilized any other way. They have no other way of bringing money and income into their household. And that's going to create a subculture that's going to be very different from mainstream Bible thumping, America. It's going to be very different because it's a different animal. That in and of itself is going to create a different culture because the way the people are getting their money is different. They got to worry about the police. They got to worry about other gang members. They got to worry about the other guy that's just hating, that just, he's just mad because you're getting all the girls and you driving a fly car and they don't have the right connections to be in the drug game. So you got to worry about the stick up kids. You got to worry about all type of stuff, But this video isn't really even mainly about that. I'm just giving you the backstory. This video is really mainly about the Second Amendment, because all this anti-gun stuff came in, all the assault weapons ban and all of that came in at the same time the war on drugs came in, at the same time the war on gangs came in to try to shut all of that down. That's when all that stuff came in. And so when you look at the map, these beliefs are still strongly held. When you look at California, right, and you see this even with the laws within California. The laws within California, they're not worried about what the gun laws are up in Napa Valley. They may issue some concealed carry permits up in Napa Valley, but they're not going to issue it in Los Angeles, or they're not going to issue it in San Francisco when they got issues in Oakland, because they do not want these black and brown minority populations to, have guns, because they still have the gangs, the remnants of the gangs that are still floating around at the apex of when the CIA was still helping facilitate bringing narcotics into the country. Now, they went from a situation that was bad. Like at first, you just had a disenfranchised population, but then you had the drugs that came in, so that Reagan could, support the Contras, right? You had the drugs that came in that fueled and flamed a whole different type of mindset, a whole different type of culture, a whole different type of way that people are going to be acting and behaving with one another now. And so you still have remnants of that. Because if you go to New York and they say, oh, why do we need gun laws? First thing they'll bring up is gangs, and drugs. You go to Los Angeles, you go to California, you ask, well, why do we need these guns in California? First thing they're going to bring up, gangs, and drugs. That's what they're going to bring up. That's why their laws, are the way, that they are. And, looking at all of it, as, let's take what the timeline is right now. Maybe things are changing, because, yes, you have black people who have historically voted democratically and ironically voted for the same people that seek to disarm them. But they don't view it that way. They view it in the manner of they live in communities where violence occurs every day. And they want to get the guns off of the street. They're not thinking about preserving their Second Amendment. Their attitude is if you make the guns legal, if it's a crime, then nobody's going to have guns and the guns will just disappear and dry up and then we won't have any more homicides anymore. But that's a stupid way of thinking, because people who are already committing crimes, people who are already selling drugs and all that other stuff, they're going to find a way to get a gun. And most of the guns are not coming from the states with the strict laws. The guns are coming from out of state because the rest of the United States is different. It's rural America, where you have people who are running around fearful of being attacked by the imaginary gang that they saw on some HBO special, or locked up, the the History Channel, or MSNBC special, but they live in these, 98%, white communities on farms and, out in the countryside, where there aren't a lot of minorities. Not to say that there's not crime out there, that they can't get mugged or anything by, even their own people, but there's this fear that a lot of these white rural Americans run around with, and they're not the ones that live, in the inner city. It makes no sense to me when you have, white folks that run around and they cry, black on black crime, and then act like their biggest fear is to be the victim of black on black crime. I'm like, did you not just say it was black on black? People kill people where they live, I caught somebody today trying to make a stupid argument about people being mad over the Eric Gardner and Mike Brown and Oscar Grant and Sean Bell and I remember the name of the shooter. I don't remember the name of the victim. The whole situation with Michael Duncan down in Florida, Trayvon Martin. They were making the point about, black people, they get mad over when white cops kill black people, but not when black people kill black people. And I'm like, man, that's a false equivalence. Because black people get upset when innocent people get killed. They get upset when innocent people unjustly die. As far as a lot of black people are concerned, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. This system of white supremacy and economic disenfranchisement, I just stopped judging people because I know that the system is screwed up. I know that there isn't a lot of hope, for a lot of people to get out of the situations, the cards that they've been dealt. So I just stopped judging them. I'm not saying it's right. Clearly we all know it's wrong. But I'm just not going to judge them given the cards that they've been dealt. So, I hate when people try to make that argument. It's like, when two drug dealers get shot, most people in the black community are like, oh, two pieces of shit got killed. So what? Even though they do have they empathize with them a little bit because, that's just the nature of the beast. They've been dealt those cards. They've been put in that situation. It's not like anybody else is presenting any other options out here. So, I personally, I just don't judge them. I don't agree with it. Not something I would do. I've never been put in that situation where I've had to make a choice like that or I didn't have any options like that. But I just don't judge them when it comes to that. Yeah, I know what the powers that be, do to keep people in their place, and I don't have any, delusions about that. But, I look at what's happened lately with the whole, the anti-Obama-ness, which I personally believe is supported by tons of white racial resentment. The idea of, he's the blackest thing up there and a black man being a figurehead of authority. And it unnerves a lot of white people. And you see this with, comment sections on YouTube. You see this, they don't attack him on policy. They attack him on dumb shit, like trying to compare him to Hitler, trying to compare him to Stalin. I mean, ridiculous stuff. And, and then, just the othering of Obama. I noticed that as well. He's not one of us. You know what I mean? I'm like, he's as a matter of fact, he's 50% of y'all. As a black person, I should have more reservations than you all should have. But I guess the fact that he's married to a black woman kind of negates the idea that he's working in the collective best interest of white people. But yet, go talk to some black people and talk to black people's economic situation and ask, what has Obama done for us? I don't, it's like white people believe that, Obama is walking around taking money out of white banks and throwing it, to black people. I'm like, that's not what's going on. That's not what's happening. People are struggling out here, And then you'll have people who jump up and they're like, aha, see, he's not doing anything and you should be against him too. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I already know that, a lot of what the people who are saying that are on, they're not gonna operate or act in the collective best interests of African Americans. They're not gonna do that. That's not their goal. Their goal is just to simply, get their guy in and get the guy they don't want out. That's all it comes down to. Looking at the where things are going now, personally, I believe that the anti-gunners, it's kind of obvious that they've already lost, but they're really going to lose. And I personally think that that's a good thing, because I think that the Democratic Party has gone too far in terms of the Second Amendment. I believe that many African Americans are too blinded by trying to stop the violence in their community via, get rid of the guns, as opposed to, let's talk about, economic opportunities that we need in the community. I'm like, I don't care what you create or make illegal. It's like you need to, fix the problem. It's like you don't clean somebody, you don't clean shit off of somebody while you still got them in a pigsty. You get them out of the pigsty and then you give them new clothes. Then that way you don't have to, try to wipe them off every 2 seconds. And a lot of the solutions that I see people trying to impose in the black community are nothing more than band-aids to a hemorrhaging wound. The problems are not spiritual. The problems are not moral. The problems are economical, period. And you can't even begin to have a political agenda if you don't have an economic agenda. We live in a plutocracy. We do not live in a democracy. If you don't have money, this is why you have lobbyists. The fact that their lobbyists exist tells you that we live in a plutocracy and not a democracy. If you don't have money, if you don't have infrastructure, if you don't have an economy, you can forget about your voice being heard in the political system. So, what black people need is we need industry, we need jobs, we need infrastructure. That is what is needed. All this, going out there and voting, that's not going to do anything. Aside from the fact that white people can just simply throw money in the direction of any black politician that they want to serve their interests as opposed to serving the interest of African Americans and African American communities. So, saying all of that, I look at the situation of Shannon Allen. I look at the situation of the guy in Utah that got arrested, I believe, at LaGuardia, and how New York and New Jersey, they just completely ignore, I think it's the 1986 Protection Act, where you can go if your destination is legal as where you're leaving from, to carry a firearm, then you should be good. And they just ignore that, and I look at the whole concept of reciprocity, and I do believe that it with the Republicans controlling the Senate, I do believe that now would be the time for them to make the move on creating a system of reciprocity, even though I know that there's a lot of people that have reservations about that, because it's like you're going against the it's either states' rights or it isn't. And I forget which argument that is. Is a federalist argument? I forget which one it is. But you're going against the idea of state rights. You are and you aren't. That's the best way to put it. You are and you aren't. It's not exactly that way, but it kind of is that way, when you look at it. But I don't think that there's not enough of a sense of that personal protection is going to solve things in blue states. like California. And again, like I'm saying, all these states are the way that they are because the CIA dumped drugs into black communities. Okay, these are why you have like the whole rest of the United States. You know, I can carry in 33 states, but New York, New Jersey, D.C., right, another large, black majority city. L.A., which is in California. Any place, and even like Chicago. They were forced to have this, they recognize the Second Amendment. If it wasn't for the courts, then Chicago would be off the map. Anywhere where there's a large number of black people, you're going to see strict gun laws. And the irony is that black people, to a great deal, voted these things through because of how they viewed, guns in their community and the problems that the guns were creating because of the drugs. But nobody examines who put the drugs there. They just go to the end result, which is, 17-year-old dead, killed by a gun from a 16-year-old, and they don't know where the gun came from. So, if we get rid of the guns, we'll solve the problem. They don't want to go to the root, and neither do the majority of white people want to go to the root. Because then that would bring up white guilt, and that would bring up, the system of white supremacy that they want to say doesn't exist, or, that was way, 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 way in the past. They want to ignore all that. That the goal of gun control has always been to disenfranchise, the African American population. That has been the main goal of gun control in this country. And you see this even before drugs were a big-ass problem in the United States. Even before the 80s, even before the crack era. Okay, you had the 1968 Firearms Act. Okay, that was to keep guns out of the hands of black people because the Black Panthers walking around with shotguns, even loaded shotguns, freaked them out. People, they always want to talk about, the Black Panthers. In what state were the Black Panthers mainly in? They were out in Cali. Cali got rid of their open carry laws when they saw, black men walking around with shotguns, even if they were unloaded. That still freaked them out. And again, if the Tea Party were black, we would call them the Black Panthers. Seriously. But I do think that the gun laws are going to change and that you're going to end up eventually with national reciprocity. Now, the people are going to whine, they're going to bitch, they're going to cry, they're going to say, we don't want this in our state, blah, 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 especially states like New Jersey. They're going to sit there and try to deny people their rights or try to create, even more restrictive laws, and I'm seriously speaking, I'm rooting for the Republicans, in terms of the Second Amendment. I'm rooting for Republicans in terms of people's right to keep and bear arms. I'm rooting for it, even though I don't agree with them on certain policies, certain belief systems, certain viewpoints. I agree with them on the Second Amendment. I don't agree with them on much else. And I agree with them on being, fiscally conservative to a degree. Fiscal conservatives, I can actually have a conversation with them. It's the social conservatives I can't have a conversation with. I do think that, eventually we will end up with a United States of America where, having a concealed carry license will be just like having a driver's license. If I drive to, Wisconsin, and I, when I get pulled over, the officer says, can I see your driver's license? And he recognizes the driver's license despite the fact that it was issued in the state of New Jersey. That's how concealed carry licenses have been. But the only reason why you see these strongholds like New Jersey or New York or LA, the only reason you see them acting and behaving and responding the way that they are is because when they think issuing gun permits, they're thinking that black criminals somewhere are now going to have easier access to guns, and we're going to go right back to the 80s and, the whole gangbanging, problem. That's what they think is going to happen. That's exactly what they think is going to happen. And again, the map speaks for itself. The map speaks for itself. Okay? If I asked you to pull up a statistic on, 1988, and the murder rate, and you look at a map, that map is going to look the same as my carry concealed license map does. That's the irony of it. It's going to look the same. You're going to see, California, red. New York, red. Newark, New Jersey, red. D.C., red. Right? Chicago, red. That's what you're going to see. If you just on homicide statistics alone. And they fear going back to that. And I'm saying that has been, a lot of the Democrats, agenda. That's been their talking point. We're going to clean up those streets and get drugs and guns off of the streets. Because, drugs and guns go hand in hand. We're going to get them off the streets. We're going to get the drugs off the streets. We're going to get the guns off the streets. We're going to get the gangs off the streets. They all go together. But see, people way out in the Midwest, they don't really know anything about that. They're thinking about, standing in line and somebody comes and robs a bank, or, they live in an area where, it may take the police, 15, 20 minutes to get there. So the concept of having personal protection makes sense. If you got one of those, driveways that go down a cornfield before you get to the house and whatnot, it may make sense. You're where you live looks like a whole level from Left 4 Dead, the video game, for the people who are older and don't play video games. But I'm saying, it looks like Left 4 Dead 2, But personally, I think they're going to lose. I think they screwed up I think that a lot of this stuff is going to end up at the Supreme Court, and it'll be very interesting to see what the Supreme Court decides to choose to do. I called it with the whole may issue thing. I knew that D.C. was going to do that. I knew that they were switched to shall issue, which, again, turns, your Second Amendment from a right to a privilege, a special privilege, right? But then what they do is they just like New Jersey, and I wish somebody would address, the fact that New Jersey is pretty much Chicago, okay? It's worse than Chicago, because, they're not, they don't issue out permits. It's on the books. They say it if you're, ex-law enforcement, or they might have, if you're sleeping with a judge, you might get a permit in the state of New Jersey. But your average person cannot get a permit because they will be denied, because they'll say, do you have, the whole, good cause, type of thing. So they'll be denied off of that, which I mean, people are jumping around. I'm like, you want to call Obama a Nazi? I'm like, call these, police chiefs and sheriffs who follow, that type of standard, and judges who follow that type of standard, that jump up and say that, you can't have a permit because I've arbitrarily decided that, your reason for self-defense is not good enough. That's not good cause. It's like, damn. So if I'm a woman, I gotta get raped before I can defend myself. If I'm a man, I gotta get assaulted before I can defend myself. I mean, by then it's too late. I may not survive the assault. So it's like I gotta get messed up, just to get the Second Amendment. I mean, I should just go pay one of my friends off, tell him to punch me in the face and, carjack me and drive my car into a tree and set it on fire, and then say, look what happened to me. I deserve a permit to carry. That would make more sense. Nobody should have to go through, what we have to go through, in New Jersey or D.C. or New York. Even New York is a little bit better, than New Jersey. But again, notice the rules in New York City are different than upstate New York. Well, at least before Cuomo went in there and threw his SAFE Act all over the place. But I'm saying, it was different because it's less densely populated, it's less minorities, it's more white people, and, white people are good and safe, ignoring the fact that they control all the damn jobs and economic opportunities and the financial resources and all that other stuff. That has nothing to do with their behavior and their aversion from crime. Absolutely nothing to do with that. No, those minorities and black people and Spanish people, they should be acting and behaving morally, despite the fact that they're, a rock's throw away, from, poverty, absolute abject poverty, and it's this type of mentality that people have. I'm like, that's not gonna happen, man. You can't have that many broke people living generation after generation being broke, and then people gotta watch, the other half of society enjoy, all this material wealth. I'm like, that's not gonna happen. We live in a society, that people are measured and valued by their material wealth. And the same people saying, well, that's the problem. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about buckets of Jesus and Christ loving and this, that, and the third, are the same people that just bought a brand new F-150, truck or something like that. Same people living in gated communities and nice homes, flat screen televisions on the wall, and a comfortable lifestyle. It is about having a comfortable lifestyle. That is what it's about. That's what the American dream is about, the pursuit of happiness, And let's face it, having nice shit makes people happy. It's not everything. It's not the be all end all. But that same money that goes towards a television is the same type of money that you need to have a household with relative stability and a retirement plan, and sending your kids to decent school and sending them to college and everything else. Same money. It's the same money. However somebody spends it, that's up to them. But it's the same money. You got to be in the same position. But anyway, that's all I wanted to share. I'll put the little clip at the end of the video, to share with y'all for the people who still don't get it or they want to pretend like they don't get it. But it's a good documentary. I mean, I just took the clips that I thought were most pertinent and the most important, and put them up there. But anyway, that's my video. New Jersey gun laws out.
People are amazed that some people can be, my age and older, 30, and still have some affiliation or still bang or still have some loyalty to these subcultures.
Because what I think a lot of people don't comprehend is the most obvious thing, which is that in the 60s, we still had an economy in this country that valued the strength of an unskilled man. If you were a working class guy, you were tough and loyal and courageous, that meant something in the workplace.
So guys would be in high school and guys would be banging and guys would be kind of messing up. Then they'll get to adulthood, they'll get a kid, and they can pretty much segue into one of those industry jobs.
By the early mid-1970s, semi-skilled jobs were collapsing and disappearing in cities all across the country.
It used to be my father, y'all's fathers, or whatever. Whenever people moved here, there was factories.
And now that shit's closed. Rubber factory's gone. General Motors gone. That's right there in Alameda. Industrial America was right there. You know what I'm saying? That shit died. I saw it die.
The 14 biggest factories in LA closed in the late 70s, early 80s, and stripped away the hopes of a whole generation of people. You have to imagine how the history of LA would be different today if those plants still existed. With the collapse of those factories, you lost the workplace as an organizing base.
I seen a man across the street from me lose his job. I seen the people down the street lose their job. I seen uncles, cousins, and lose their job, right?
The reason that supposedly young black men, desert families is they can't earn a family wage to support a family. One of the great racist myths in this country is the death of the black family or the non-existent black family. And people trace this back to slavery. Black Americans have never had family structures. I mean, there's not a more obnoxious, or misleading myth around. If you actually look at the figures, the collapse of the black family occurs in the 1970s and occurs in direct proportion as, young black men are just systematically shut out of the labor market.
So there go the jobs that we probably was going to be going after once our parents became supervisors up in that shit and probably would have pulled us in. They lost it.
Bone, if you had 50,000 unionized warehouse jobs, you could turn probably 50,000 gang members into industrial workers overnight. And if gangs are pathological, they're also heroic in a way. They do, or at least did in one period, embody values of self-sacrifice, of loyalty to people, and love above all.
With the jobs leaving, I think what it did, it expanded like the subculture world as being like your total world.
Gangs somehow carried on, a residue of the unity and pride, but it was now narrowly focused and wasn't the whole community anymore. It was a particular street. But it has to be understood against the context of just the devastation, the destruction of the economic opportunities.
Gangs. The drug dealers always say, you got to make a choice. You're going to be a slanger or a banger. What you going to do? And that was like the 70s thing. But once the 80s came, it was like, man, we got to do them both. I'm sure my story is no different than most of the cats throughout Los Angeles. I don't think no one intends to grow up to be a drug dealer. It just blew up, man. Neighborhoods became rich, you know what I mean? The rolling 60s became the rich rolling 60s because they were having so much money over there. So, now you have millionaires, and you have 2 or 3 millionaires in 4 or 5 different neighborhoods. So imagine, you got a gang member, 200,000 or 300,000, you got one with $1 million, and you guys all in the same set. You could do anything just about you wanted to, you know what I mean? We wouldn't go steal a car to go do a shooting, we'll go buy one. Like one summer, everybody had drugs, everybody had cocaine, all my partners, all my friends. But so why didn't that happen more so in the 70s as I was coming up 11, 12 years old?
A couple of things happened in the 1980s. First of all, the drug business went from being a mom and pop business where they shipped cocaine, a kilo here and a kilo there, to being a mass production, huge, vertically integrated business.
Crack economy became the one re-employer.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who are willing to hire, black youth.
There's no way you can get money in a dead community. Then they give you the option, sell this. Well, you have one of 2 options. Go to church and pray. Or sell it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
The drug problem is colorblind. While it's portrayed in much of America as being a black inner city problem, if it were a black inner city problem, there wouldn't be all the traffickers here because there's not enough money in the inner city to make it worth their while. The suppliers from overseas see the people in the inner city as people who are very eager to do the marketing because there's a big pool of talent there that is unemployed, underemployed, and boy, if nobody else wants to use them, these guys certainly know how to get in and make use of them.
I've always been told that drugs are coming into our community by outside forces. How did that come about?
The same flood of drugs that was coming into Miami in the mid-'80s was coming into Los Angeles at the same time, and a lot of that was coming through Mexico. There were gangs in Mexico that were supplying it. There were also other gangs from Latin America that were bringing the drugs up here. And one of those gangs, I have no doubt, was the one associated with the Contras.
Running the dope was not to destroy black people. It was to fund the war in Central America, okay? Congress did not give them money, so they had to raise the money. So they bring the drugs into the inner city and bleed us of every dime we have. Then with our money from drugs, they buy the arms in Iran and then run on down to Nicaragua and have their war. Pick up the dope and bring it back to Los Angeles, get you to sell it.
There were clandestine airstrips. There were airplanes who were flying in and out to supply the Contras. Those airplanes are coming up to the United States. They're empty. These guys know they can come and go. Nobody's going to ask any questions. And in a way, they're getting their ticket punched because they're working and helping the government. Now, with that kind of flood of cocaine, things really got out of control. But you would never in 1,000 years find employees of the federal government who sat down and said, we're going to sell drugs in South Central to raise money so we can fight the war in Nicaragua. That's preposterous.
Maybe they didn't say it, but maybe what about looking the other way? It's just as bad. Because they had to know what was going down.
There's no question they looked the other way. And they would say, hey, that's not my job.
He even took this issue to Congress, and they called it Iran-Contra. They never got to the bottom of it.
The investigation that I ran 10 years ago had witnesses that said we looked the other way. We put that all out on the table publicly. Nobody paid any attention to it.
That shit really intensified the war. I mean, so it just really just blew the whole thing way out of proportion and made it more deadly and way more violent than it had been.
So the drug trade enhanced the firearm capability.
Right, and it funded the arms race. I remember getting out of YA, and going up to Western Surplus and seeing an AK for $250 and a box of shells to go with it for $2. So if I'm standing out there in the drug trade making $1,500 to $3,000 a day, I can go buy a gang of these AKs straight across the counter. There's no grace period here. You might have a homie that might got 6 AKs because he just feeling like that. You know what I'm saying?
Once the drug trade hit, like I said, it mobilized us. We started getting out of the neighborhood because we got cars, we got money. We started trying to go where normal mainstream civilians went. And that would be like Westwood, Magic Mountain, Disneyland, all the American dream stuff. We would try to detach ourselves from our ghetto lifestyle and our ghetto world. I see my enemy in Westwood, or I see my enemy in Hollywood where I'm trying to go to the movies. And that was because the Crips had the same idea. Once they got money, hey, let's get out the ghetto, let's get off the block. As long as we were killing each other in our own little backyard from 1969 up to 1985 or 86, whatever it was, when we started getting out of our neighborhoods, it was okay. But the minute our mess spilled over into the next man's living room or the next man's neighborhood, that's when the police said, oh, hell, we got a gang problem.
The words crime and war on drugs, in effect, had a political agenda attached to them. And what we're going to do is we're going to be tough on those black people.
They responded with Crash, Operation Hammer.
We're going to wage a war. There are a lot of faint-hearted people in this nation. We keep talking about a war on drugs. We don't have a war on drugs, never have had a war on drugs, but we do have a war here on gangs.
Gang members cannot continue selling drugs in this community without a Los Angeles police officer standing over them, hitting them with a hammer.
That's what they do not have now, is any fear. And we want to create that fear in their minds.
So the war is on, huh?
The war is on, no question about it.
This is just one effort in this whole struggle that we're in to obliterate the gangs in the city of Los Angeles.
That was not Crips they were after. They were after black people.
Operation Hammer was both a kind of Vietnamization of police repression in L.A., introducing these mass sweeps, just like strategic operations in Vietnam, round up all the peasants, but in this case, round up all the black youth in this theory. And at the same time, generalizing this theory about the hardcore juvenile offender and applying it to every black youth in the city.
These were not criminals, and these were not gang members. These were just ordinary people, and many of them spent time in jail. Okay, this is a harassment that is the prelude to even going to jail and the building of the jails now.
That's the new prison they're building right across the street from the project.
Now what's happening in California is really, a holocaust of a generation, putting an entire generation of people into prison. And so you're left with this weird situation where perhaps one part of the black community, part of the black middle class, is found unprecedented mobility. But I think for, many, many working class, African Americans, this is a moment of incredible peril. It's in some ways comparable to the 1890s and the grip of Jim Crow. But now it's the prisons that are, designed no longer to rehabilitate or even particularly to punish. That's not the point. It's of human storage, warehousing a whole stratum of people that we no longer need, in the American economy.